Hello, everyone. Welcome to 1.5 Degrees, the podcast where together we explore the science, solutions, and stories involved in the fight against climate change. I'm your host, Heidi Pan, speaking with the professionals behind the latest research policies, culture, and innovations shaping our response to global environmental challenges. For today's episode, we are honored to be joined by Aayushi Singh, CEO and co-founder of Growth for Green and former content producer and current CFO at the Foreign Policy Youth Collaborative. Aayushi has always been passionate about environmental change and feminism and has strived for change in the environment within her community. She brings her passion for activism and changes to Growth for Green to not only help the environment on a larger scale, but to help empower young people through intersectional environmental activism. Thank you for being here today, Aayushi. It's an honor.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
To start, you have done a lot of incredible work with Growth for Green. Could you walk me through how you came to start Growth for Green and what your organization is all about?
Yeah, definitely. So my organization, but I really like to say our because it really could not have been done without my amazing co-founders. So our organization was founded in 2020, and essentially like we were all on like this climate webinar type discussion thing that we were on, and we're all like very appalled about like the types of climate change issues that were being discussed, the types of environmental injustices that were being discussed. At that time, there was a lot of news on the California wildfires and the way it was being dealt with in different communities, and its overall impact. So we really went out onto breakout sessions and we started discussing how we can make an impact, how we can further educate ourselves. And that's kind of how our little starter cohort came to be. And then as we kept on having these discussions, we decided we wanted to branch out and co-found our own thing to make an impact not only within our local communities, but also on a wider scale. And essentially, we just started growing and growing as the years came. And now we're here and we're partnering with other amazing local environmental nonprofit organizations and other quote unquote bigger ones, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily
No, I
big
get you. Yeah.
scale. So yeah, and it's been a very exciting ride, I definitely say. And honestly, without my team, without our members, we really wouldn't be where we are today. So it's been really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So you mentioned that you work with a team of people and that you are collaborating now with other organizations. Can you tell me a little bit more about like what that entails and also perhaps someone or like yeah, no, that I guess I could leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, we definitely have collaborated with, I guess you were going to say people as well. Yeah, so we've definitely collaborated and invited people onto our events. One of them being Jossie from Brown Girl Green. We've also had a professor from Rutgers University of Law come speak with us before, and speak about environmental injustices, law, politics, and how that all comes together for climate activism and social justice. And we have previously partnered with Clean Ocean Action. We have an ongoing partnership with Branchbrook Park. A lot of our partnerships entail park cleanups or informational sessions. And we really want to not only educate the public, but encourage discourse and direct action, which is really what all of our partnerships and all of our events and activities. We even have essentially like challenges, we like to call them, where we promote sustainable activities, sustainable events where our members come together to do a lot of these activities to make their own environments more sustainable and equitable on a climate and social standpoint, and also educate and promote that type of discourse as well. So yeah.
No, those are really important issues to kind of to highlight, and also discourse is so important in the climate movement. So in that, kind of adding on to that, you've communicated with adults and youth with the Foreign Policy Youth Coalition, and also with Growth for Green. So, in amplifying the voices of young activists, what is something that you've learned in the process of bridging intergenerational gaps, and how did you come to learn that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a really, really good question. Um, I think it really starts with a lot of the times it really just starts with the fact that either side feels like we're being unheard, like, or
Mm,
that one side has a greater understanding, or one side doesn't have as much of an understanding, or it gets very confusing because we have our own biases. So, really educating ourselves in that way and coming together and saying, okay, you know what? It's not about our biases and trying to put those aside. Each generation, each person really comes with their own unique perspective. And in order to gauge that perspective and understand how to take that perspective and move forward within the climate movement and within any social justice movement, is that you really have to sit down and be open ears. Like you really, and coming, and sometimes, regardless of somebody's viewpoint, sometimes it really takes a lot to just listen, right? I mean,
mhm,
I was once on an environmental seminar, and there was a cohort and one person had joined. I'm not sure if this person was trolling, whatever, but had completely like had a very different take on
mm,
environmentalism than I did. And it was shocking, but that take had led to discourse and had led to more points within the environmental movement on how we can actually make a sustained impact.
mm.
And I think that in those moments, we really need to ground ourselves and see, okay, I mean, of course, as long as they're not like racist, bigoted,
Yeah, yeah.
like other than the general, like, be respectful of everybody, of course.
Right, right. No, for
But
sure.
I mean, I really think that in encouraging that discourse, it is important to be open to all those viewpoints because many people are going to come in and have different takes on environmentalism,
Mm,
environmental injustices, the way to go about combating these types of issues. And on a personal standpoint, I found research to be very, very significant in really shaping my understanding of environmentalism alongside the activist talks that I've hosted and also been to in the discourse within Growth for Green and FPYC. And I really do think that not only an open mind when you're having those types of conversations, especially when it comes to breaking that intergenerational barrier when it comes to these
mm.
conversations, but also educating yourself and having those types of citations on lock, right? Like, okay, you always want to have, I'd say, 3 to 4, at least in my list, of well reputable sources that you can be like, well, I was actually reading X article the other day, or there was a research project that I had once looked at or was a part of, and this is what we found. And that's when you really get people listening, but that's not
Mm.
always necessary. And you can always just point to an article that you had previously looked at and really have that type of discourse as well on both sides, as long as it's like knowledgeable and respectful and whatnot. So
Yeah, no,
yeah.
definitely. Yeah, no, discourse is so important in terms of like meaningful action. I feel like so often um we are kind of left to our own sort of echo chambers,
Mhm.
be it like environmentalists or those who are climate skepticists, which
Mhm.
some, like you say, some who
Yeah.
are not treating people with respect, that I have a whole other deal with. But those who are like wanting to learn more, um really it's about like bridging the gaps and having discourse in order to have and share knowledge and make meaningful action. That's a really good point. And you also bring up a good point about like being able to cite yourself
Mhm.
and have that evidence to back yourself up with. And that's really great advice. I will definitely take that into account. That's really important to kind of
Yeah.
arm yourself with those things.
Yeah, and
Um
I mean, in no way is it like absolutely necessary to like memorize like
yeah.
30,000
Yeah.
articles or anything like that. But I have found it very useful, especially if somebody it is very like pertinent on like not really listening to you at first. And sometimes you will encounter people like that. And it's important to, I feel like, maybe let those people say what they want to say and
Mhm.
then be like, yeah, I completely understand you. Like having that common, um, like mutual understanding. Like maybe I don't completely agree with where you're coming from, but I can understand why you have that take.
Hmm.
And then kind of giving your own evidence or your own perspective and why you have that perspective is really, really useful. And as you said, discourse, I think, is literally one of the most important things to further the environmental movement or any social
Hmm.
justice movement. And I think that knowledge is really power, especially when it comes to these things or anything really. So it's really nice to be armed up with both, I would like to say, when discussing any type of social justice matter, because you know what you're saying is reputable and you know that's harder.
Hmm.
So it's, well, what my capstone teacher likes to say, our local
No,
research
I got
teacher,
you. Yeah.
is that it's really hard to say no to a reputable like thesis or research
Hmm.
project, because it's like it's already been cited before, it's already been um certified, that's it has legitimacy in what it's saying. So yeah, I think it's good to have for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So going off of that, in terms of like discourse and leading to change, what are some changes that you hope would be made in the coming years to support intersectionalism and also empower young people in environmentalism?
Yes, oh my god, I can like go on and on about this. Okay.
I mean, go off, go off. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, okay, so I definitely think that, especially in recent years, like we once heard about like Flint, Michigan. We once heard about
Hmm.
that major environmental injustice, but I feel like so many like smaller environmental injustices go completely overlooked. And I feel like there really needs to be more of a standardization of how to combat such environmental injustices. And I think that comes with a more unified media reporting so that there isn't this overcrowding of like false news, I feel, or like
Hmm.
playing down environmental injustices, especially when it comes to BIPOC communities and low income communities. So I think that's definitely one of them. And I think there needs to be more standardized media reporting, especially for that. On another note, I definitely think when it comes to youth being more empowered, I think we're seeing more of that now. And I think that really starts with incorporating like climate activism into our education more. So I feel like because climate change is not as much of a quote unquote problem that people can see right in their face, it's often
Hmm.
overlooked and it's often
Hmm.
not deemed as heavy of a subject. But like, again, knowledge is power and we need to incorporate these things within our education. And I really wish that there was like a standardization of that within our curriculum across the country so that more people can be educated on the impact and the effects. I mean, we're already seeing it, right? Like this
Hmm.
entire
Yeah.
year has been, the weather has been all over the place. And that's only a small part of the effects of climate change, such a small part. Um, and yeah, I mean, like, I feel like there needs to be less of students taking the initiative to go out of their way to get this type of information, because I feel like that's a lot of what uh climate education has became. Like, truly speaking, it wasn't until like freshman year and I still haven't taken a class any of
Hmm.
my high school courses, and I don't think that's a representative of our school. I think that's more a representative of like the system. um
Yeah.
I really think that like if it wasn't for those seminars that had popped up on my TikTok, I would be very ignorant to a lot of the effects or in the a lot of the um like how horribly disastrous it is for our well-being and our earth. And it's going to very well affect our livelihoods very, very soon. Um so I think that's another one of them as well. I think there needs to be some type of standardization within the curriculum to have climate education more standardized and focused on, like possibly like everyone has to take FinLit, maybe everyone has to take climate education for a semester, something like that. Um, and the third one I would definitely say is, especially when it comes to youth empowerment, is to have more programs for youth, and not like educational programs but just activity programs from a community standpoint. You don't often hear about them as much, uh
Hmm.
beyond cleanups and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
also like sustainability challenges at your local like community center. Like ways to win prizes on a more standardized level for doing for making the environment cleaner. I feel like that would definitely push people to be more sustainable. I really like the law that was currently passed in New Jersey for there to not be any more plastic bags unless like you're
Mhm.
sold them. Because that has definitely cut down some plastic waste. But I think that we can go one step further, and maybe promote like subsidies for more sustainable living. Because we also have to remember that a lot of sustainable products have became expensive. They are so expensive. And
Mhm.
that puts a lot of low income individuals at a loss. And I mean, that's like a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But it really, I really do think that, if there were subsidies, if there were more programs
Mhm.
to further sustainable living, we could be at a better point in combating climate change and climate injustices than we are right now, for sure.
Yeah, no, you touched on so many important topics there. I mean, just about the fact that like so often it seems like a student responsibility in this climate movement, but then at the same time, students or young people feel disempowered to be able to speak up because so often it's hard to kind of step into this field and feel like you can be heard. And I think like education, like you said, is so important in being able to resolve that. And then also the aspect of how difficult it is to lead like a sustainable life, so to speak. Um, like that, I really want to hear your opinions on this. There's really kind of an emerging movement on like imperfect environmentalism.
Mhm.
Um, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, with imperfect environmentalism, I assume you're talking about like not having to completely be sustainable because it's became so like
Yeah,
expensive,
yeah.
because that's what I've heard. I just wanted to make sure I
Mhm,
had
yeah,
it
yeah.
right. Yeah. Okay. No, I've heard about the movement and I honestly think it's so fair because I remember there used to be times in the environmental movement, or if you saw some environmental posts where people would like be shamed if they were environmental influencers, whatever, if they were using some non-environmentally friendly products. But the thing is, not everyone is going to have resources to spend like $80 on like the next sustainable water bottle.
Mhm.
Sometimes people aren't going to have those types of resources, and sometimes a lot of our clothing isn't even sustainable. I mean, when we look at fast fashion, there's so much wrong with fast fashion. I could go on and on about what's wrong with fast fashion, but it is cheaper, and a lot of people don't have $130
Mm.
to afford like a sweater or like a sustainable top, because I mean that's a lot of money, and a lot of people are not going to have that money. And I think that it's really fair. I think that we live in a capitalistic society, and in this capitalistic society, we it has benefited from not being as eco-friendly, right?
Mhm.
And I think that it's unfair to put it all on the people to, break their bank accounts and break like sacrifice their livelihoods to be sustainable. I think that it's all about putting your best foot forward and being as sustainable as you practically can. There's a
Mhm.
lot of ways to do that even within your home, right? Don't like keep the water running for too long, right? Try and use reusable cups. Um try and use like reusable water bottles. Don't If you can't afford if you can afford sustainable fashion, great. But if you can't, maybe go thrifting. Maybe and again, don't go thrifting in low income neighborhoods. Not good. But thrifting in areas where it's more affluent per se, right? And you can reuse, recycle your own clothes. Upcycling is really big, right? That's something you can do that's cheap, and you can make some really cute tops. I know like I've even crocheted tops before. I mean, there's a lot of ways to be eco-friendly without breaking the bank account, and I completely understand that notion. And I think it's really unfair to ask the people to sacrifice their livelihoods to be sustainable when capitalism essentially enforces it, right?
Yeah,
So,
you bring up a great point about that. There really is definitely like a point is really is a privilege at times to be able to lead like there's this movement of like zero waste
right.
so to speak and such like that. You bring up really great points. Um so Do you have like to go back to your organizations that you've been involved with, what are some memorable or favorite accomplishments that you think or projects that you've worked on?
I don't like that question. God, there's been so many, dude. Oh my God. Ah, okay, yeah, okay. It's hard to pick one, but I think one of the most memorable was we had a professor from Rutgers Law, and we that was our biggest event, right? We had over
Mhm.
300 RSVPs. We could only like it was a very big event. And I remember just like what she told me always, like what she said in that, what told everyone, but what she said in that webinar really stuck with me because
Mhm.
she is so well spoken. She really is. And she said that there's going to be a lot of social issues and like social justice issues that you will be so passionate about in your lifetime. But to truly make an impact, you really need to hone in on one or two if you want to make it your career. Or if you not even career, if you want to make a lasting impact. She's
Mhm.
and of course I'm not saying it to quote her, but that's what she said along the lines. And that always stuck with me because in a sense that was so correct, right? Like as many issues as I care about, there's only so many that I can fully dedicate myself to make a lasting impact. And I mean that stuck with me, and I take that within every single activity or social justice activity I do, because it's like really take this activity and make the most out of it to make the most lasting impact. And I think that should be everyone's goal, right? Like you don't want to, as much as we want to just go full force for every social issue we can find, we can't necessarily make a lasting impact because so many people can't make a lasting impact within the next 100 years to fully resolve a social issue, right? It's a systemic problem. Clearly, even
Mhm.
with climate change, a systemic problem. And so many others are as well. Um, so really honing in on one has, and I feel in my case scenario after taking that advice had really helped me not only find my niche, but also be able to connect with people and not only see overlaps of social issues I care about, but really further the impact in this area as well. And that really got me that really solidified my interest in environmental activism and environmental politics. So I think that was one of the most meaningful ones. In general, though, I really think that every meeting I've had, every event I've been to, especially like just collaborating with my team and talking to our members, even like popping into like youth advisory. We have like a tiny cohort of youth advisory council within Growth for Green,
Mhm.
popping into those meetings, hearing what our members have to say, hearing their perspectives within meetings on certain topics, whether that be sustainable living tips and like their points or some of the ways they've incorporated sustainable living. We're talking about our takes on environmental injustices across North America. I mean, it's all been so refreshing to hear because like in those moments you have true discourse, and
Yeah.
in those moments, I feel like I educate myself and I bond so well with our members and my team. And it really feels so great in that moment. Alongside that, I would definitely say our activities because it was really fun just like going on, whether that means like we're doing a tiny like activity over Zoom or in person, whatever it may be. That's
Mhm.
always fun. I always love going on park cleanups with their team. We've had a couple of those, and it feels nice to be out in like the open helping, whether that be Branch Brook Park that we had a partnership with,
Mhm.
um and kind of pick things up and whatnot, and it would be good, yeah.
Yeah, no, you touched on a lot of really great things there about how like it really is helpful to engage with communities. I think that's also personally where I find a lot of fulfillment and inspiration to keep going on at this movement, because at times it really can be overwhelming, I think. Because there's so much injustice and disaster happening nowadays. And it's really important to just focus your energy, because we're all human. We all only have a finite amount of energy, and that's really great advice. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course,
Um,
yeah. And I mean, like, honestly, when it comes to like organizations and talking in general terms, I just think finding that sense of community, because that sense of community is going to be there for all of your ups and downs within like trying to pursue climate justice, or trying to better the climate movement as a whole, right?
Mhm.
And trying to make an impact. And having that and being able to bounce back ideas, that has been the most solidified part of all of it. So I really think that whatever you're doing, organizations, whatever you're really going about the climate movement, or whatever is going on, I really think it's so important to really solidify um, your people in community, because that's what keeps you going, especially within like the climate change movement, right? Because as you said, it's really hard to get youth involved
Mhm.
just because there's not a lot of education on it. Um, it really encourages you to say, okay, it's still happening. There's still youth involved. There's still like promise in the movement, right? So
Yeah, no, that's really great. So going off of that, what would you say is like where do you see yourself maybe going from here in terms of like what are your hopes for working in environmentalism?
that's a good question. Honestly, I've always wanted a career in environmentalism. Um, right now it's not been 100% solidified, but I really do want to go into environmental politics. That's like
Mhm.
the end goal. I really want to make sustainable policies. That's my big thing. So I'm hoping that I can become a congresswoman one day, but that is a long shot. But that is the dream. But in between that, I do think I will be going to law school and pursuing environmental law. And yeah, that's really the goal overall. And I think that in between all of that, I'm definitely going to doing keep advocating for climate justice, environmentalism, whether that be through nonprofits like Growth for Green, and continuing that discourse. And I'm actually already working on my senior capstone project is on environmental injustices.
Mhm.
I definitely think that doing that research is going to be in my future as well. And I had already had previous research on it as well. So that's why I'm very big on research, because I really think that it shapes the way you view things. It shapes the way
Absolutely, yeah.
you so if you can ever get that type of experience, or get that hands-on experience ever, definitely think you should, because it's so insightful. So definitely continuing my advocacy work and doing more research before we get to those quote unquote career points. But overall, I think the main goal is to continue making an impact in any way possible.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice. Is there anything else to kind of close off that you would say, perhaps if we could turn back time, butterfly effects aside,
Mhm.
what are some like pieces of advice that you might say to like you when you were first starting out on this journey, or someone who is aspiring to kind of step into this field?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I really think that in going into the environmental movement, a lot of times you're going to be met with discouragement, I feel, because you will look at the news and you will see, wow, it's still happening. No matter how many beach cleanups I've done, no matter how many park cleanups, but that's the thing, right? It's never gonna be this one size fits all. We've had, as like civilization has continued, we've had so much impact on the environment,
Hmm.
right? In every way, shape, or form. I mean, the houses that we're living in, like every way, shape, or form, we have had an impact on the environment. And in doing so, there's been a lot of damage. So it's definitely the type of movement that you're going to really have to solidify yourself within a community, right? You always want to find other people that are as motivated about like climate issues as you. And I think that finding that community really grounds you into becoming a propelling force of change, right? Because you not only bounce off ideas, but you also become encouraged to find new ways to advance the climate movement. I wouldn't say solve it, but advance the
Hmm.
climate
Yeah,
movement.
I got you. Yeah.
Um, So I think that's definitely one thing. And I definitely think that, find your niche. I think climate
Mm.
change, climate activism is such a broad field, really, and people don't really see that. But you have, climate change, you have environmental injustices, you have the science factor of it, you have the social factor of it, you have the political factor. I mean, there's so many different niches within it, and really seeing where your strengths can make that bigger impact is really where I feel where you should go for, right? And just see where what aspects of climate activism really like motivates you, what really makes you go, oh, I hate this. And I mean, of course you're going to see all of that and be like, oh, I hate this, but what parts really do you know? Like for me, I'm always been very social justice oriented, right? I'm also good at the sciences, but when it came to social justice and activism, I knew in that moment that, okay, yeah, like I can definitely use my voice, use my political influence, even though it's not great, but use the narrative that I'm always able to push
Mhm.
out for that. And I can make an impact. And in doing so, I was able to. So definitely finding your niche, finding your strengths, and finding if you're passionate about it, what can you do about it, right? That's like the biggest question you want to ask yourself. And how much do you want to do? Because you also need to be wary about not burning yourself out either,
Mm.
right? You want to make sure that you're doing it and you're making a lasting impact, and but you're also a human being, and you're also going to find people that are interested in climate activism with you. And depending on what you want to do, it could be finding new ways to be green with your friends, right? Like that can mean trying out some vegan dishes. I mean, me and my friends once made like a vegan we made like a vegan dumpling, but it wasn't like a dumpling. It was a thing, and it
I
tasted good,
got
but
you.
it was
Yeah.
like dumpling. Yeah. Doing those types of activities, because there's a balance of activism and then there's a balance of doing things for yourself as well. So finding that balance is really, really important. So I think that's a really big thing. And just educating yourself. You really need to educate yourself within the climate movement. There's so much misinformation out there, so much. And to combat misinformation, you need that knowledge. And just really don't be afraid to go out and make a change, right? That it can be like quote unquote small ways. It can be going out, helping your local community, picking up things in the park, or it can be working with the UN, whatever floats your boat. But there's no aspect that's big or small when it comes to combating climate change. I really think so. And I think that as long as you're using your voice and taking a charge for change, you really can't mess up. So yeah, just be bold and be you, and make sure you're taking care of yourself. That's my overall consensus. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's I think the best advice that you can really think of when it comes to like being involved in this, because it's again, it's so easy to get overwhelmed, but then to realize that no step is too small, and just it's always like the first step that you got to take that counts. So yeah, no, thank you so much for being here. I really learned a lot from our conversation. And I think that you are very inspiring in terms of like being involved in environmental justice, and I think that we are going to be on a good path. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And likewise, I think you're going to do such amazing things with this podcast as you already are. And thank
Appreciate
you
that.
so much for having me. It's really been an honor.